Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another episode of the Ummah Times. And we are lucky enough to have Brother Nadeem Haq back in our virtual studio. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Nadeem.
Walaikum salam.
And today we're going to have a continued discussion on the environment in Islam, most specifically on his newly published book, Ecolibrium, The Sacred Balance in Islam, just recently published by Beacon Books. And before we get into the discussion, kind of looking into some of the specifics of what's been talked in his book, I'd like to just share a little bit about Brother Nadeem. Brother Nadeem is a researcher and author and has co-authored and authored 8 books, I think more than 8 books now, in nonfiction, on philosophical fiction, including From Facts to Values. His specialization includes analyzing the Quran to resolve the big questions in physics, evolution, pre-ancient history, epistemology, and consciousness. Nadeem has given talks at Harvard, Oxford universities, in Paris, and also at the European Society for the Study of Science and Theology conference in Poland. He is the grandson of Al-Hafiz B.A. Masri, who did pioneering work and wrote Animals in Islam. Nadeem has continued research in this field, and he's a professional civil engineer by profession. So again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time and talking to us again. For all the viewers here, if you want to get a background story on how this whole research got started, of Brother Nadeem and his team on his work and research on especially the environment in Islam, you can check out our first podcast with Brother Nadeem. Today, we're going to delve into specific chapters of his book, which is Ecolibrium of Islam, which you can check out, published by Beacon Books. So, Brother Nadeem, we're going to get right into the meat of the matters that you've discussed in your book. And first topic I want to talk about is one of the chapters is, the Islamic view. What are the foundations of Islamic view of, coming up with rights for, in case, the environment and animals? So if you can tell us a little bit about that, yeah.
Yeah, this whole thing began many years ago. It was in the 1990s when Mehran Benai, who later on became one of the authors of this book, I met him and he was kind of wondering how to deal with a certain question that had been raised in his course at York University, where the professor, John Livingston, was saying that there is no such thing as a natural right or natural rights. And they're all man-made and synthetic. And as Muslims, of course, we knew that this wasn't correct. But how would you counter something like that, other than saying, well, it's in our scripture or something like that? I mean, that doesn't prove it really, right? So what we did is we came up with this argument that showed that if you actually harm nature by destroying the balances, then you see, when you do something like that, when you, let's say, for example, kill one animal, which is maybe a predator, then the prey population will increase and they'll eat all the crops, and then there's a cascading effect that harms, for example, food production, because there'll be no crops, for example. The example we had used actually was one of someone in Australia, a movie actor who made a coat made of snake skin, and everybody wanted to have a coat like that, so they started killing all the snakes. And when they did that, the rat population went up and they ate the crops, and there was starvation in that part of Australia. So I said, well, this is actually a very good example. We can use this to show that it is the inherent right of the snake not to be harmed. When we are open and use our reason and look at nature and see the interconnections, then it projects onto us. It's not something man-made. And from this, we realized that there's a right, and then we gave that right a name. We call it the equigenic. The snake has equigenic rights, from equi, which is equal or balance, and genic, which is start of origin, or which is the balance is in the origin of nature. And really, for a Muslim, the prime revelation is the Quran, actually. I mean, the prime revelation is the Quran, and also the prime revelation is also nature, really. So you have these two sources, right? So what we did is we looked at the prime revelation of the universe, of nature, and we came up with this conclusion. And this proved what the professor was saying. But that's another long story as to what happened, at York University. And then because the Quran mirrors the universe, because the author of both is the same,
Right.
so you didn't expect to find something different, and that's what we found. We found that the Quran, deals with this. Al-Mizan. It's one of the most important concepts. So this is how we came up with the realization of the foundation. And yeah.
So I guess, Nadeem, just to kind of clarify, and perhaps you can further elaborate as well. So it's probably fair to say what you're trying to say is that you looked at the nature itself first, how it truly operates, its functions, and then you basically take a step back and see, what? Well, the Quran is of the same viewpoint, and there's synchronization between the two worldviews. They're not distinct; they are rather the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You'd expect that to be the situation if the source of both the universe and the Quran are the same.
Right.
I was thinking about something because I was writing something just yesterday, that the universe is like the universe itself. It's visual, right? But it's like the Quran in a way. Like it's a visual Quran. And the Quran is like a written universe. You can look at it, that way too. And from the Muslim perspective, I know that this is very foreign to, unfortunately, Muslims. Our epistemological view encapsulates both. It's as if we have the Quran, which is like a universe within the universe. Like we have a universe, but we have the Quran, which is a universe within the universe, right? And if we know something for sure, like linguistically that it exists, that's the way I see it. Maybe some people will disagree. Then it states that very clearly in the Quran, and we haven't found it out in science, for example. Then I would say, yeah, it exists, right? But you have to have the confidence and an understanding of the Quran, basically, to have that kind of epistemological view. So our epistemological view is actually wider. But unfortunately, most of the Muslim world doesn't know this. So
with those underpinnings and understanding, like how did you kind of I guess rediscover the Islamic view on the animal kingdom? Because we know from the earlier times of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his closest companions, they were on point on this in terms of taking care of animals and the very ethics and practice they put in practice. So if you can kind of articulate that, like how, in terms of knowing these underpinnings and coming to this understanding by looking at Allah's creation, the Islamic view on the animal kingdom, if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the prophet being the prophet, and and the revelation came to him, and he had this knowledge, right? He and he was a compassionate human being, and he was sent for as a mercy. He was naturally kind of when he saw an animal even being psychologically disturbed. For example, we talked about it last time. This bird, when its babies were taken away, its chicks were taken away, then he was saying, return them. And so he kind of knew that. You see. Now the thing is that 1400 years have passed by, and we can now assess many things in a even much deeper way now, because of the buildup of knowledge, right? It only makes sense, right? So what has happened is that when I was thinking about all this, it suddenly dawned on me that really you have only four principles from which you can derive the whole of societal structure, societal system. And I call these things ecological recognitions, ecognitions, right? And I said that there are four of them. The first one is that everything is a trust from Allah. The second one, that we don't own anything, right? The second one is the ecogenic principle, which I just discussed. i.e., it has this aspect, it has the al-mizan aspect in it. Then all animals are in communities, which people didn't know until especially the Western world, until the 20th century, right? And then that, the personhood, the idea of personhood, that each entity is unique unto itself. Like even a little little ant, it has its own, two ants won't have the same personality, that kind of stuff. So, and so I realized that all of these are recognitions. That's all you need. Just like, for example, Newton's laws, you just need the 3 laws to explain all of mechanics, other than, if you're near the speed of light. You can, so similarly, using these 4, you can derive your system as an optimal system. So, because, for example, with the first one, you can derive an economic system in which you are not the owner, you're a trustee. So you're not arrogant, and you develop your system based on that. And you're then cognizant of the second recognition, which is, maintaining the balance. But the balance cannot be maintained unless the animal communities themselves are in balance. Do you see that? It's very interesting. And the animal communities themselves are, what are they? They're comprised of individuals. And unless individual rights are given, then how can you have a community? And if you don't have a community, how can you have the balance? And if you don't have that, then it means you're not really cognizant of, the creator as being the owner. So you need all these. And then I realized after that all the prophets, everybody, like all of them, they came for only, okay, there are 2 results of this thing which I'm talking about. They're 2 products, but they're also sources. So the two of them are affinity, which means that you feel close to an object and therefore you take care of it or someone, right? So the idea of affinity comes from, it has to be understood. It's understood only through this idea of consciousness, that we all share a consciousness that Allah has commanded, and all animals have that consciousness just like our consciousness, just that they're in different forms. And once you realize this, then you have affinity. And once you have affinity, then you have empathy. And if you have empathy, you have compassion. And if you have compassion, you take action, right? And if you take action for that compassion, you have justice, and then you have peace. So it's like a formula. So in other words, like this whole thing that I'm talking about is like a formula. So that's affinity. And the other one is the ecogenic flow, which means, maintaining the balance, like the ecogenic flow has to come out. So all these prophets from time immemorial, they came with the same principle, right? Of course, the principle is, there's one God, and, you do your prayers, and, all those things, they're part of it. But I'm talking about from a conceptual point of view. Now, the thing is that because it's a formula, if you want to have society, if society bases things on this, then you'll have an optimal society. But the societies we're living in, they're only like having aspects of these, right? So in capitalism, do you think they follow any of the cognitions? Of course they don't, right? They think that they own everything. There's no creator, and profit maximization is the main goal. It doesn't matter about human beings, right? Even if they die or whatever, So, and then what about the balance? Of course, who cares? They don't care about the balance. They don't care about that animals are communities. They don't care about individuals, right? See, so now the third and fourth recognitions, which talk about communities, if you want to expand it, which is what I did then, as well, is you bring in human communities, right? You see, because human communities are supposed to be like interconnected with animal communities, right? Because there's a verse in the Quran that says that there's not a crawling creature on the ground, or a 2-winged, a flying creature, but they're in communities like you. Okay, so the whole system is supposed to like function that way, and if you have it, that's the formula basically. So it's like Coke is not a great example because it's not a good drink, but the formula for Coke is in a vault, and it's a secret, right? And people who try to make a drink like the Coke can't make it exactly, right? It's because there's a specific formula. There's a factor X or something like that. Okay. I know it's not a good example because Coke's not good for health, but I'm giving you an example. Or you could use another analogy, right? So you could make something like the Coke, but it's not exactly like the Coke. So you could have a society which you have a kind of a just leader, and he thinks about environmental laws and this and that. So he has a kind of a system that is not too bad. but it's not, nothing like the system, that we're talking about, because this is the optimum system, and this is what the world has to come to. The reason is because we can just destroy the planet like never before, right?
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting. Sorry to cut you off, but it's interesting that you're bringing this up, because if you look at the history, do you know if looking at just the Islamic history in the past 1400 years, if these concerns were ever raised, and also you think they were not raised because the issues were not present, or were they present and not raised? And second is basically if there was never any issue in the past 1400 years, I'm not going beyond 1400 years, it's looking at, from the Islamic perspective, that means it's probably started at the advent of the Industrial Revolution, right, in the 18th century, late 17th, early 18th centuries. So in that sense, then, all the problems we are facing on a planetary scale are, another day, the Industrial Revolution is the root cause of that, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I think that we don't know so little about our past. Even they say only a fraction of our work, the work that the Muslims did, the amazing work they did, has been translated, and people don't realize it's only a fraction. Like it's less than, someone was saying 5% or something. But even like, say for example, Ibn Rushd, like most of his works have been, you don't have most of them. Right. And so, but imagine that about 1400 years ago, Al-Jahizi wrote a book called the Book of Animals, and he realized that animals were in communities. They have language, they speak.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I mean, right now, if you look at linguists, they say, they make sounds, but they're not like, can't make sentences. But some are now finding out, wow, they can actually say stuff, right? So the Muslims, they were very advanced, and I think that, and I talked about that, the way the technology was, it's not a pollutive technology. It's all based on cycles. The Banu Musa brothers and all that, they developed hydraulic systems, and of course you didn't have pollution, then, but once you see. Now with the manufacturing systems, if you're thinking in an Islamic way, you think of how does if I create something, it has to be created also in a cyclical manner. The cycle has to integrate with the larger cycles of nature. In other words, I have to mimic nature, right? Because the technology of nature is the best technology. The nature of technology should be the technology of nature. And I said that in the book. Now they're finding out about it and stuff like that. I mean, I worked at York region as in waste management for the asset management plan, and they were saying we're gonna get zero waste. That's our aim, right? Basically. So they are looking at that, but I think that the Muslims were way advanced, and I think that it's just that with colonialism, the thing is that everything got destroyed basically, with the colonialism, and then with the fall of the Muslims, and after the Ottoman, empire, if you want to call it so-called empire, okay, then things started to go downhill, and now we're just following them. We're just mimicking in the wrong way the West has been doing things, through this kind of the industrial system that they have, right? It's just based on profit maximum exploitation, and this is just going on and on and
commodification of everything.
Yeah.
So it seems like to basically really go about making any concrete change in the world, there has to be an overarching world order, right? And seems like it. What you're suggesting is also in your book. You're not explicit about it, but at the same time, what you are really saying is that we need to adapt the Islamic principles if we really want to save the planet and live harmoniously, with other species that we share the planet with. So that means, an overarching world order based on the Islamic principles is almost a given if we are to see any changes.
It is a given because, like I'm saying, that that this is a formula, and if you don't have it, you're falling short. And interesting enough, that verse in the Quran says, "Do not fall short of the balance."
Right.
So so society is kind of falling short by not following it, or they could be coming closer, but they're not following anything, right? So
and what do you suggest the roadmap should be to get to that level?
You know, what we need,
without getting into the politics, but you know,
no, I mean, in
how we
reality,
can make people
in
aware. Yeah,
reality, in reality, we need a massive revolution of like thought,
right.
and the Muslims really have to, um, you know, kind of, you know, really study the, you know, the Quran, you know, use their reason, you know, not get into this
Right.
nonsense about mysticism or traditionalism or thisism and that is
Right.
nonsense. You know, just focus on the Quran, you know, focus on the, you know, hadith, which are correct. You know, you can study the previous scholars, you know, if they make sense, you know, take, you know, what they've done. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but at the same time, we have, you know, we know a lot more, so we can develop further.
At the same time, you have to move forward, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And and again, what Ali had mentioned in terms of having the world based on Islam, based on the principles that Islam kind of propagates, is it's based on it's on a rational basis, because my next topic was to contrast it with the claims of the other, or I don't know if they even have claims like this, of the other belief systems, and we kind of probably partly answered it, but I think it's good for the viewers to kind of show that as well, in terms of, he contrasted with other quote unquote belief system, why it looks, why you have made the case in your book of the Islamic worldview, especially in terms of safeguarding Earth and its inhabitants and the environment. So if you can kind of touch upon, if when you with your study on when contrasting with other belief systems, and if you can share your findings on that.
Yeah, yeah. So this book was not a kind of a comprehensive kind of analysis of different belief systems with respect to Islam, but I do cover some of that. So, for example, we know that when Prophet Jesus or Isa came, he came with Islam, obviously, and so did Moses and everybody, right? You don't have a God who sends prophets teaching different things. It doesn't make sense, right? So they came with the same thing, but the principles were the same, but it was geared to the environment and all that stuff, their environment, their times. So now what's happened is with the Bible, for example, Christianity, the concept of dominating Earth, you know, arose, which had nothing to do with what the original message was, you know, and it just became distorted. So then what's happened is that you have this domineering view of conquering nature. Now, when you have that in a scripture, then those who want to dominate it, you know, might feel guilty. But if the scripture is saying that, then they feel at ease, more at ease in doing all these wrong things, right? So they would use scripture to justify, you know, what they're doing, right? So but at the same time, in the Bible, you have statements of you know, like Isa, he was, you know, most compassionate, right? And the case has been made that when Jesus talked of love, he talked about love, you know, for all creation. So there's this aspect in the Bible, but it's been overshadowed by the domineering view. Okay, now as far as the other belief systems go, now remember I said that the ecognition, the formula, it has the idea of one like a creator, and that you're a trustee. You see, you're a trustee for that creator, and that creator is one. So these other belief systems, for example, current day Buddhism doesn't have this kind of concept of an overarching creator. And if you don't have that, you don't develop taqwa. Taqwa means consciousness, right? And if you don't have this idea of taqwa or consciousness, which means you won't do anything wrong, even if you're alone in a room, because you know that there's a creator watching you, then it's not really, it doesn't give you that first recognition, which is a major part of like a formula. It's like, you know, you know, you're trying to develop something, but you leave out the major ingredient, right? So in that sense, Buddhism is like someone once commented, is like a ship without a rudder. But originally, and I wrote an article on this, I showed that Buddha himself, he believed in one God, and that in my view, he is a prophet. And I showed why and how and where that's mentioned in the Quran, but that's another topic, okay? So, but at the same time, in Buddhism, you have, you know, these principles, and these principles, they coincide with Islam. For example, the idea of not being the middle nation, as the Quran says, not going to an extreme. You have this idea of the, doing things in a
Right.
balanced way, right? So you have those concepts in Buddhism, which is good. But I think the Buddhists have to be shown that really Buddha was talking about God, basically. There's not enough work has been done on that, because the Muslims themselves don't realize that is the case, actually. So that is one thing. In Hinduism, Hinduism is a kind of a motley of a concoction of many, like there are many different belief systems, and they're all lumped together as Hinduism. But within Hinduism, you have also like these ideas, because they also had prophets. But again, things have been distorted over time and been over complexified. Like really over complexified as far as I'm concerned. And then this is not attractive to the modern mind, right? Like it's
Mhm.
but you do in some Hindu belief systems, like they have many, right? Vedanta philosophy and all that. You have in some of them, you have this idea of one creator who is like totally independent of the universe. So there are views like that. So what I'm saying is, if you have that first recognition and you're applying it, then that's good, right? But you see, the thing is that the Quran is the most clear. It gives it to you. The whole package is there. You don't have to kind of sift and sort and figure out for 30 years, like, how am I gonna make sense of, is Jesus the Son of God? And let me look into this, like, let me study this and I'll figure it out. The answer is already there, right? So
if you think about it, it's like like the final revelation. It's as if it's spoon feeding humanity.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting. Because if you just on a cursory level, if you look at prophetic history, where prophets came, yes, they had this concept of God and living God consciously, and then they went away. They start practicing paganism, and then the Creator had to send another prophet to reform them.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the Quran compared to in terms of revelation, it's like now it's spoon feeding you. We have no more excuse, right? If you think about it.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't. Our only excuse is our desires. That's essentially what it boils down to. Right?
And that's not really an excuse. That's not an
No,
excuse.
it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse. It's a person who's seeking the truth, will take the evidence wherever it leads him or her. That's just the reality. Now, if it's going to harm something that you're doing, some pleasurable activity, and therefore you don't want to do it, then what kind of argument is that? It's not even an argument. But people use various and so-called pseudo arguments.
True.
Pseudo arguments, basically.
And I think we already kind of covered the contrast of the Islamic view with capitalism and secularism. So it's a given, right?
Yeah.
Because secularism is a godless system. It's actually based on desires, but based on the desires of the elite, I guess, in a way. The way the world functions now is a fusion of capitalism slash secularism, right? So, and whoever's in control, we go by their desires. That's how it seems to be working right now. Yeah. But in terms of in the Islamic worldview, we know it's very clear that we are living in this world to actually die, to transition to our real home, which is the afterlife, right? And it's the Quran and the Sunnah makes that very clear. Our path, like what our path is. We're like travelers in this world, traveling to our real home, which is the afterlife, after the transition of the taste of death that we'll experience. Yes. Now what's interesting is that you have a section on animal afterlife, because that's at least for now in contemporary times, regarding discussion on if animals will have to afterlife it's not really discussed, or it's not a topic that's very popular, or it's not even brought up. So based on your kind of research in this area, what is your view on animals having an afterlife, just as human beings are are clear to have. So, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, so I think Muslims are under the wrong impression that animals don't have souls. Now, because this kind of concept of soul that I have or came up with in my research was that it's a consciousness that you know is kind of Allah lets us access. So everything really is conscious, and so when we die, then what happens to this consciousness? And if every animal has it, then surely it must survive too. But then the other issue is that when you look at the Quran itself, it's saying that that these creatures which are crawling or flying, one day all of them will be gathered. Like the Quran is saying that. Now the question is, when they're being gathered, what's going to be happening? There must be a purpose, a reason for that, right? And in the Quran it says that that Allah is not unjust to his creatures. So if these creatures have fulfilled some task, which they maintain the balance, and this universe has been created to test entities like us, so human beings on Earth, and the Quran says that there are countless planets with life on them, extraterrestrial life like ours, right, carbon-based. So if the universe has been and there are non-carbon based entities, so if it's been created to test these so-called higher entities, then it wouldn't work if we didn't have animals, right? So they played a role. So the question is, are they just kind of discarded into nothing, or is there something, right? Plus, many people have had amazing relationships with their pets, right? Animals, and they really love them. Some of them love them more than human beings. Their family members, right? Like human family members. So really, what happens to them? So I think that there's something there, but I can't say for sure, and we can speculate on that. But this speculation that they're going to be called to Allah is not a speculation. Like, that's not a speculation. That's in the Quran, right? But people have not paid much attention to that.
Yeah,
right?
and this is very interesting because, like you talk about the word used to a word that's used that when one receives revelation. So so in your book you talk about the bee receiving wahi when they're guided to find their spot of settlement, etc. If you can tell us a little bit more about that, because this kind of ties in with what you're talking about in terms of animal afterlife. Now, I mean, because Allah has given us, he's given us a roadmap, but he's also given us a reason to kind of discover things in this abode of Allah, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, like Allah does not go in depth regarding the jinn, right? Because the Quran is for revelation for humanity. So as thinking human beings, we can look into this. We can try to make inferences about it. But obviously, if B has received wahi in terms of their guidance, they may have received some sort of. I mean, it's not a stretch to imagine that animals may have also received a more clear wahi to them, somehow communicating to them that they do have an afterlife.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I'm saying that, but if you can tell us a little bit about the wahi that bees have received, because I believe a lot of people don't know about that aspect. So if you can.
So for example, you have the monarch butterflies who, when they're born, they travel thousands of miles to a particular location in Mexico. How do they do that? Like, did you have one monarch butterfly who suddenly by accident ended up there, and then somehow it started communicating with the other ones that were being produced that, hey, we got to go back to Canada, the north, and then I believe, and when certain animals are born, like turtles, they know exactly where to go. Like they go in, like if they're born on the beach, they know they have to go into the water. Like, and you have the bees. The Quran talks about that to build their hives, and this is a wahi. Now, so that is a revelation to them. So, in my view, and I think my grandfather had this view, that animals are definitely, they're conscious of Allah. Like, they're actually conscious. They know of the existence of one God. And by the way, like, someone may say, well, that's kind of that's carrying it too far. These are just like automatons. But remember the story of Suleiman and the bird. He was talking about that the Queen of Sheba, she was not, following God, and like it's talking in terms of sentences, it knows about Allah, right? So really, now, so what was happening is that the animals, they're following wahi, and what's happening? They have the mizan. We have been given wahi. The same word is used, the Quran, right? Are we following it? We're not. And we're not in harmony, right? We're not producing that equilibrium. So the animals, in a way, are like our teachers. Actually, they're maybe you can get the best khutbah from them. Actually, how they're following things.
Yeah, that's true. Like that's very interesting because and also you can talk about the ant as well, how the ants were. Yeah, if you can tell us about that as well, like how.
Yeah, so ants, they communicate using pheromones, like that means chemical signals, and also maybe I think they make sounds as well. I think you sent a video, for example, that was very interesting about the sounds, and these sounds are actually they have syntax, so they're like sentences, right? So in the Quran it says that when a female ant is there and suddenly Prophet Solomon's army is coming, saying, "We better get out of the way because Prophet Suleiman, may step on us without us being aware." So not only that, so it's also reflecting. Imagine this: the ant is reflecting on the mental state of another entity. Do you see that? That's like very high ordered thinking. This goes way beyond what they currently know or believe in. Most linguists believe in that.
Yeah, exactly. And like ants are like just my cursory research on ants is they're amazing creatures. I was recently watching a nature show on ants, and it's very interesting. The ants have they have like, in a way, they have undertakers and chemists. So basically, after they make their kills, the ants, they do like they have some retained, right, for whatever reason, and it's very organized. The undertakers organizing these dead victims of the ants, but at the same time, you have another group of ants, part of the same colony, who are getting rid of some of them. So in order that they don't get infected by whatever bacteria or whatever, right? So I was amazed. I was like floored. Like, it's so much we don't know about nature and these like amazing creatures, very tiny creatures that Allah has made. Like, we have no idea, and that just tells you more. It just helps you in the glorification of Allah more.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah. So I remember once he was my co-author Mehran. He's really into nature and watching videos and stuff like that, and so he's got a lot of knowledge of that. So he showed me of this this island or something. I may be getting it wrong, but there's an island where there was flooding all around it, right? So the ants would have died. So he said to me, stop the video. He said, "What's the solution? How are they going to get out of it?" And me thinking that, oh yeah, I've written so much about animals, like I can figure out things. I couldn't figure out how the ants would get out. Do you know what they did? They formed a boat, kind of a boat like a structure, like out of themselves, like they joined together and they left the island. Can you believe that? Like I couldn't think. I never thought about that. So it's amazing.
Imagine humans doing that.
Yeah.
You know what? I told you separately, right? If the ants were our size, we'd be goners.
Yeah.
They'd be the rulers of the world.
Maybe it would be better, actually, the way things are going. But anyway, yeah. So yeah. So that's that in terms of animals.
To the same effect. I mean, I think we were talking about the afterlife of the animals. There's also a hadith, I think, that mentions. I'm just kind of paraphrasing it, that even the score between the two horned animals, or two animals, would be settled. One with the horn. Let's say if there's a animal with a horn who got into a fight with the animal without the horn, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the hadith talks about that as well. That Allah will raise them on the day of the judgment and let the score settle between the one being oppressed. So there's definitely an aspect of accountability to animals as well. Because if there's an afterlife, I think we have to be mindful that the purpose of afterlife is directly linked to the concept of accountability. If there's no accountability, then it doesn't really matter if there's an afterlife or not, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have to look at them as consolidated view.
Yeah, I have a slightly different view on this. In my view, it is only like the so-called free will entities that have accountability. So in my view, the animals will not have that kind of accountability because they are in submission to Allah, 100%. They're in submission, right? But there may be some other aspect to it, because when you are entering into paradise, Allah, he clears everything, for you. Like, you have
Right.
no feelings, you have nothing. So there may be some kind of thing going on there like that. Who knows?
Mhm.
But that's my view on that.
Well, that's interesting, and I don't want to kind of go too deep into this area,
Yeah.
but it's interesting that there might be like, well, Nadine, what do you think? I know your view is that other non-human animals are purely they're purely like operating under kind of the will of Allah in a sense. But I've seen like I've seen like I've seen some examples where there has been some skirmishes between animals. It's not a predator prey thing, but there's been some skirmishes, and then what happens is one animal is attacking another animal, and then another animal saves that animal. So there's an element of, as you mentioned, there's an element of feeling going on.
Yeah.
It's possible, like there's so much we don't know, right? There could be some feelings that are in play, which may be somewhat negative and positive going on in the animal kingdom, right? So I don't know if you ever kind of thought about that.
Yeah. But the whole of the Quran is really addressed, and it seems to be addressed to these kind of so-called free will creatures, that they maintain the balance and things like that. Whereas animals, they're part of that. And I think that when they fight and this and that, it has to do with maintaining the balance, so usually there's cooperation. There's more cooperation than non-cooperation, but there may be areas where there's so-called competition. Again, as I said in the foundations, that chapter, it's not a matter of cooperation or competition. It's a matter of these animals behaving in a certain way to produce the balance. That's what it is. Now I may be wrong here. Who knows? Maybe there is some accountability. But right now, that's my view, that they don't have that kind of an accountability. But there may be something to appease them, like what the brother Ali mentioned. There may be something like that, though. I mean, I can't discount it, right? Because we're entering areas of speculation over here a bit.
Yeah.
But there is definitely something, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Quran, right? Yeah.
What I was also curious about, it's very interesting when I've never seen, like in books on the environment, you have a whole section on overpopulation, and you call it the overpopulation myth.
Oh yeah.
So if you can talk about a little bit about that, because I think even when I was in high school, like this was kind of ingrained in us that we have a population problem on this planet.
Yeah.
And it was like, among other things, that we're being kind of brainwashed on this aspect as well. And I didn't give it much thought. But after thinking about it and how it's related to, certain people in the world who want to control the world, and they're always propagating, oh, we have a population problem. And then after I kind of looked at it and I go, really? And then you actually, obviously, you've done more research in this area. If you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done that much research. I've done some basic research, so I included that with Mehran, and so really, what it is that the carrying capacity of the Earth is huge, and we don't know what it is, and so people are just arbitrarily saying it's overpopulated. What is that line which distinguishes being over and under? I mean, what is the proof for that? And then you have people, for example, like Paul Ehrlich, in 1976, he said, oh, there's going to be food problem. He made everybody panic. But then with technology, we're producing more food, right? So people didn't starve because of that. The reason they starved is because of wars and mismanagement and corruption. That's the reason, right? And like, how come areas where there's, there's a lot of land, but there's a lot of war, there are a lot of wars going on, and their population isn't that much, they're suffering. But areas like, say, for example, Tokyo, is heavily populated, but they're thriving. Like, so what does that got to do with anything? And then, you have India, who's manufacturing, beef and exporting it, yet people are starving there in the country. So really, it's got absolutely nothing to do with, that if we keep, reproducing, and you get to 10 billion, 15 billion, it's going to destroy the earth or something. That's not going to happen. If you take the whole of the population of mankind, it can fit in Texas with, I don't know, some calculations have been done. One can do it yourself.
Yeah,
right?
I saw that. Yeah.
Can you imagine, like, the whole of Earth's population can fit in a small area in Texas, like maybe
Right.
not the whole of Texas, right? With
Yeah,
space.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and also, like, I think, I don't know about Malthus, but a lot of these other guys, I think it's more based on ideological motivations, right? Because a lot of people are also, they have a lot of these guys who are pushing this overpopulation idea have a background of eugenics as well, their belief system.
then the other thing is that, a lot of people, for example, are scared of, say, oh, the Muslims their reproduction rate, so-called Muslims, whatever, okay, their reproduction rate is twice on average higher than other, other groups, right? So it means that, like, every 10 years, the so-called Muslims, as a fraction of the total world population, it's increasing by a huge percentage. Now, if you extrapolate that, what does that mean? Like, even if they're not even using their brains or reading the Quran, at least they call Muhammad or whatever, like, what does that mean? It means that most of the earth is going to be populated by Muslims in at least nominal Muslims. It's just a fact. And a lot of, I'm not making this up. Go on the YouTube and you see various groups, they're saying, oh yeah, this is going to happen. Like, what are we going to do? Like, because the Muslims have been made into a boogeyman, or whatever you want to call it, right? So so there's that going on. And then the West, as usual, wants to exploit various regions, and the elites controlling, have people running the world through corporations and all that. They would rather have a smaller population to control than a huge population. Like, it's easier.
There's actually a really interesting book. I'm not sure if you read it or not. It's called Land Grabbing by an Italian journalist.
No,
so it basically talks about where, a lot of these corporations, especially, for the past almost 10, 15 years now, especially from the Western countries, European countries, Western countries, including China and some of the Asian countries, where basically the major corporations are buying a big chunk of fertile land in Africa, right? And other regions of the world, but primarily Africa. And they basically using them to, produce, obviously, cattle and crops, most of the cash crops. And they are in, like, hectares and millions of hectares. There's a lot of corruption going on by these African governments, where they would sell the land essentially for pennies to these corporations. And they sell them as, well, we're going to bring in a lot of technology. We're going to bring in, your local population will have a lot of jobs, right? So it's better for your economy. But if you think about it, the majority of the African countries are struggling, when it comes to the food supply. And then you have these corporations, using their fertile land and taking those crops and exporting them back to their homelands, right? So again, it's really depends. We spoke about the overarching, world order, right? The global world order. So it really depends, who's really, behind that, and how the world's being operated.
Yeah, and it also underscores the point that we are living in an abnormal situation. You see, mankind is not supposed to be split into various nations. What's supposed to be happening is that they're supposed to be following one creator, right? And they're supposed to be following Al-Mizan, and they're supposed to be coming up with justice. You could have different regions, but they'll be under one kind of system, right? And by having these nation states and all this, like look at what's happening right now with Russia and Ukraine. I'm giving an example right now that's happening because people think of nationality. Like it's total idiocy. Just think about this. Our planet Earth is so small, like it's like a speck,
Right.
in our galaxy. Yeah, nobody would even know that we exist, right? And yet we're so stupid. Humanity on this planet are so stupid that they're fighting for pieces of land on the speck, right?
Right.
And the galaxy itself is a speck in the speck of the universe. In the eyes of Allah, the universe is just like a speck, right? But we are so foolish as mankind. That's why I say that, sometimes I really wonder whether we are living on one of the dumbest planets in this quadrant of the galaxy. There may be others like us, stupid like us, but really we're just fighting for no reason, and creating injustice, right? So just about the population, that right now, especially the European countries, the population, the fertility rate is less than 2 for, women, and that's a problem because you need at least 2 children per woman, like an average. And I think among the Muslims it's higher. Okay, so the whole issue is actually highly problematic. Look at China; they never followed the ecogenic principle. Maybe they should have read that
Right.
book that I wrote. and they had this thing about the one-child policy, and now it's become a problem. Now they've kind of reversed that they don't have it, but you have who's going to take care of the older people, right? You just have one child. Like, it's created an imbalance, right? But that's when we're so arrogant. We don't believe in the creator, and we go away from the creator and start doing our own things.
Right.
It's actually a very satanic thing. Like, really,
Mhm.
of course, who believes in Satan? Because Satan is supposed to not exist, right? But the whole thing is very satanic, actually. Like, that's what in reality it is, right? And we have to get away from that towards the message of the prophets, basically, for all of mankind, right? And we have to. We don't have a choice, because now we can really destroy the earth, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, regarding just going, just kind of just finish off the overpopulation subject. Yeah, you're right, because all these guys, these experts, they've done a projection, and it's true. They are afraid, and as how things are going right now, they will be Islam will represent the number one religion in the world. So that's part of the motivation as well,
Yeah.
driving this overpopulation myth. It's safe
Yeah.
to call it, right? So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
now, in terms of I know we briefly talked about action plan, but in your chapter, I think it was. So we're just gonna just talk about the last chapter you mentioned is worldview founded on nature. So it's basically this realization that humanity is missing, right? Because as I kind of see it, is there's a couple of things going on here, because Islam is not some mystery, right? It's something very clear that's out there for anyone to look into.
Mhm.
But the world, as you said, a lot of they're not majority of the world. I'm not going to say majority of the world, but there's certain powerful sectors of the world who, to either one of two things are happening: either they know Islam is the truth, and or but it just, for whatever reason, they're going to fight against it, or the others are just they're ignorant, right? And I don't think Islam right now, in terms of propagation of Islam, is probably not going to come from. It's not going to come from the top down, because the top is so corrupt. Maybe there has to be some sort of grassroots efforts. Have you just kind of thought about this? How this could go about, how in terms of propagation of Islam should go about, or is there any hope at all for this planet? I don't know.
No, there's hope, and the Quran says that, the verse, and we've talked about it a lot of times, that where God says that we will show them our signs in the farthest horizons and within themselves, until they know that this is the truth. Is it not sufficient that your sustainer is a witness to everything? So that verse is basically saying that in stages, people will come to realize the Quran is the truth, right? Now, does that mean that they all become Muslim, or does it mean they're aware of it now? Okay, that's something that I'm not sure. I have my views on that. But
Yeah,
but
and I do see some glimpse of that, and
Yeah.
and I do see some glimpse of actually um glimpses of that coming from new Muslims actually. So there's some new Muslims who, when they embrace Islam, I'm really amazed on their journey and how they had to reject the culture, the secular culture they were born in, or whatever non-Islamic culture, and they've embraced Islam like in total, right? And I see that that's more than a lot of Muslims who are born in Muslim families have done. So yeah, there is some, and I think this growth of Islam is coming from new Muslims, and it's coming from, I guess, Muslims who are waking up as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm optimistic.
Actually, in my view, we are in a resurgence, a renaissance period right now of Islam. It's at the early
Mhm.
stages that we are. And when people look back at the history, at history, they'll say, yeah, the number of things were happening there, like this science Quran correlation, like correlation between what's in the Quran and history and science. That was one of the factors that motivated this. But, more things are going to happen based on that verse, because see, that verse ends with, that signs within themselves, which is what? Consciousness. This consciousness is a big topic right now. There are
Mhm.
conferences being held. Like, what is consciousness? And I think we have the answer to what is consciousness, right? So what's going to happen is that once people realize this consciousness, what consciousness is, and plus the consciousness, I said, is connected to the idea of affinity too, right? So what's going to happen is that we're going to kind of develop really good systems, and people are going to realize, yeah, Islam has the solution, really. And at that stage, when enough people have realized, what consciousness is, at that time mankind will become united as one. I know this seems abstract for many people, but I think that that's the way it's really going to go. Someone say, well, what about wars and battles, like, between the Christian world and Muslim? And you see, like, even if you have something like that, you see, you gotta like, real change only occurs when you really realize and understand things, right? So I think that verse is saying that the real change is going to come through understanding, and realizing things, right? That's how the real change in the world is going to happen. And it's like discussions like we're having right now, you know then people start look at that and say, yeah, that's interesting. I never thought that the Quran talked about these things, because they always distort the message of the Quran usually, right? So then people start looking, they start talking. I mean, a lot of people, non-Muslims that I know, have purchased my book. I mean, they're my friends, they're not Muslims, and they are starting to think about these things, right? So yeah, it's going to happen through education. It's going to be a long haul, long haul.
Well, I thank you for that, Brother Nadeem. Ali, is there anything you wanted to um, add to this, or?
No, I think this was definitely a refreshing podcast. One of the most refreshing ones we have done in a while, actually. This is a topic which is definitely not talked about much, and I think we would also leave the link from where they can purchase the book, the viewers. So I definitely recommend they go and purchase this book. Give it to your friends, families. Spread the word. We need, as Muslims, need to be talking about these important critical topics, which are affecting not just us, but also the other species, with whom we share the planet. Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And Brother Nadeem, again, we'll be putting the links to where they can purchase the book. It's Amazon, right?
Yeah, it's Amazon, and also the publisher's website. I can give you
Oh,
that.
okay. All right, great. So we'll be putting that online, and yeah, the viewers can continue the discussion in the comment thread of our page. And again, I thank everyone for listening. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay. Walaikum salam.